video will teach you how to make the roaming sampler blanket, where what we're going to do is we're going to tackle 7 different stitches in panels over 7 days. Now this is a no-sew pattern, which means we'll be crocheting each panel onto the previous one as we build it up. So I'll also cover tension before we start, joining in yarn, how to do a border, and final blocking at the end of the series. So this 10-day crochet along will teach you everything step by step to be able to create the roaming sampler blanket. But what you will need in order to make this blanket, number 1 is the pattern. Now that is available in the printed edition of the Autumn 2024 TOFT Quarterly, or at a later date you will be able to get that digitally too. You'll also have it if you buy a kit, so you can buy a complete kit that includes all the yarn that you'll need, and you will get the pattern there as well. So you'll need the yarn to go with it if you haven't already, and I'm going to be working in a double knit weight of yarn. The quantity you will need will vary on the size of blanket that ultimately you want to make, but as a starting point, to do a 90 centimetre by 90 centimetre finished blanket in a double knit yarn, you will need 700 grams of a pure wool double knit. Then you're going to need your crochet hook. Now on average, it's probably going to be a 4.5 you need, but you might need a 4 or a 5 subject to your tension, and we'll cover that in today's video. Then you'll also need a wool needle at the end for sewing in those ends. There's not a lot of sewing up at all because we crochet each panel together, but you will still need a wool needle for your ends. Then the only 2 other bits you might need is a stitch marker, but you could use a scrap of yarn if you wanted to. This is to just mark your right side to make it a little bit easier when we rejoin the panels, and then obviously scissors at the end as well. So that's everything you need. I hope you've got your yarn ready. You can either go for single colour and you'll get an effect like this, or the original pattern, and as I will be working in this series, I'm using 7 different colours. So I'm going to be starting with my colour 1 today. So before we begin, let me just talk through the construction of the blanket. So where we're going to begin is with this central square. And so on day 1, we're going to be making this panel here, which is the most basic. Then we will master front post, back post to create a rib. So that's our central square. Then we will move on to the panels. So on this day here, we will master bobbles next. Then we're going to be doing the waffle stitch following that. Then we'll move on to the basket weave. Then we'll be doing twist trebles here, so we'll master those. And then finally, we will finish off on clusters. So what we're going to be doing over the course of the crochet along is making this complete square here, which is a complete first go all the way around your central panel, and then we will finish by doing the next bit of the puzzle. So what I will then leave you with is the ability to add these panels on to then continue to make your blanket as big as you wish it to be. So before you begin, if you're going to go for the 7 colour version like the original, what I would advise doing is writing yourself a key. So I'm going to be remaking it in these 7 colours here. And so what I'm going to do is literally write myself down a little key that says colour 1 cream, colour 2 silver, colour 3 teal, colour 4 steel, etc, etc. And that way, as we hit each panel, it will be obvious to you which one you go back to. And this is because the pattern has designed to be clever enough that the same colour won't hit the other one if you follow this pattern. So if you decide to go for this 90 centimetre blanket as it is completely in this pattern, you'll never be making the same stitch in the same colour twice. So that's quite enjoyable. And you will never end up with a yellow panel, for example, touching a yellow panel. They're always split up far enough away that then they're lovely and even, and you get a lovely overall patchwork effect without any repeats. So before we actually start this first panel for our blanket, today I'm going to talk a lot about tension and teach you the complete basics. So if you are a total beginner to crochet, you'll be able to master this treble stitch that we'll be using for the rest of the time, but also get your tension right before you begin. Now, I also know that a lot of you won't check your tension, so you won't do this today and you'll just dive in tomorrow. Now, when you're making a blanket, tension obviously is not as important as if we were making a hat or a garment where the item has to fit you. But what will be important to get right with this blanket is you want it to feel soft, squishy and stretchy. You don't want it to be too stiff. So to make the blanket, we're using a TOFT double knit pure wool yarn. And recommended is actually a 4.5mm hook. Now, if you've made Edward's Menagerie animals before with that amigurumi style of closed crochet, then you would normally be using a 3mm hook as standard. And that's because we want it to be a dense closed fabric. With a blanket, we want it to have more movement. By and large, we're going to be using the British treble stitch. We'll cover that more later in terms of the difference between British and US terms. And so you're going to need a bigger hook. Now what we're going to do now is we're just going to do a small sample square for you to get an idea of whether your tension is tight or loose so that you can change that accordingly. So I would say that if you are a total beginner, get your 4.5mm hook, get your double knit yarn, and let's now do a little sample square that we can measure just so you get an idea of whether you might want to use a bigger hook or a smaller hook to make sure that the texture of your blanket feels like mine. Right, so let's go from the very beginning of crochet. Now, I am a right-handed crocheter, and that means that I'm going to be holding my crochet hook in my right hand, and I'll be holding my yarn in my left hand. Now, when it comes to holding your crochet hook, there's two different holds that you can go for, but really it's the one that suits you the most. There is no right and wrong. It's the one that you are most comfortable with. So what you will see in my videos is that I hold mine over the top like this. So my hand's coming in across the top of my hook. The hook's facing me forwards, and I can very comfortably rotate it by 180 degrees. You'll see other people that will hold it like this, so more of a pencil hold, how you would hold a pen or a pencil to write. And so long as you can turn it very comfortably by 180 degrees, then there is no right or wrong. If you're totally new to crochet, you might want to try it both ways while you learn until you find something that is most comfortable for you. So to make our tension square, what we're going to start with is we're going to actually chain 20 stitches. And the chain stitch, I guess, is the most easy stitch in crochet. If this is the first time you've held a hook and yarn, you might want to practice not just 20, maybe a couple of 100, and then pull it back until you feel very comfortable holding this hook. But before we do that first chain stitch, we actually need to tie a slip knot. So to tie a slip knot, take the tail end of your yarn, wrap it round like this so you've got a circle, go through that circle and take the tail, and don't bring it right the way through. Bring that loop through until what you've got is a loop that can be controlled to be opened and tightened from the tail. So I'll just do that again so you can see it. And just to clarify, I am using my colour 1 here to do my sample swatch because we're not starting the actual blanket. You could use a scrap bit of yarn that you've got separate. You don't need to use your blanket yarn because what we're about to make won't form part of the blanket. So once you've got your slip knot on your hook like that, let's talk a little bit about holding your yarn in your left hand. So obviously if you are a left-handed crocheter, you'll be holding this in reverse, so the other way round. I am a right-handed crocheter, so I'll be holding my yarn in my left hand. So this video is going to be a little bit about tension, and we're going to do some measuring at the end, but a lot of the tension will be set by how you hold this yarn in your yarn hand, your left hand if you are right-handed. Now you'll notice that I hold very, very little tension on my yarn. All I'm going to be doing is knocking that back on my index finger like that. This means that my tension comes up slightly looser than average. Now what is probably most common is putting one wrap around your little finger and then coming up onto your top of your hand like that, and that will just put the yarn under a little bit more strain, which will put more tension in. If you find that you are someone, maybe if you're a knitter, or especially if you're a knitter, that's got a few more wraps involved in this hand before you put it in, you might find your tension is very, very tight. So you might want to consider dropping a few loops off. But by and large, I've got my hook in my right hand in an overhand position, and I've just got my yarn tapped across my index finger there on my left hand. So let's do a chain stitch. So to do the chain stitch, you need to bring your hook and you want to bring it over the top of the yarn like that. So your yarn comes from the back forwards to do a yarn over. Then you rotate that hook towards yourself like that and then pull it through the loop that is already on your hook. So that is a chain stitch. That's one chain. So do the same thing again. So bring that hook across, hook onto the yarn like that, twist it forward to make it easier to bring it through that loop and through. So that's 2 chains, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Now, because I've been doing those really slowly so that you can see those nice and clearly, my tension's nice and loose there, probably even more loose than normal. So I'm using a 4.5mm hook right now, but I probably, to keep my tension comfortable, would swap down to a 4, and I can see that almost straight away. But what I'm just going to do is pull that back and just show you that if you are somebody that maybe has done the chain before, so you're a bit more comfortable with doing the chain, keep it a bit tighter than I had it there as my initial demonstration. So keep the tension a little bit tighter so they're a little bit smaller. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And you see how straight away that is a lot smaller than it was when I initially did it nice and slowly. Now, I can't emphasize more that tension is a thing that varies a lot, especially in this style of pattern. It isn't that with a blanket, it can go very, very wrong for you. It's just the fact that you'll be very tight on your yarn quantities if your tension is too loose, and your blanket will have less structure, less hold. It'll be floppier for you. And if your tension is too small, you'll have to do an awful lot more crochet to get a big blanket, because obviously overall each panel will be smaller. So don't panic too much about tension, but be aware of it once we do the measuring after we've done a few stitches. So to make our tension square, we've chained 20 stitches, and now we're going to turn and we're going to master the treble. Now, this is going to be an absolutely essential stitch as we carry on with the blanket. But what I want to really emphasize and point out right now is my accent. So I have a British accent, and this pattern and what I will be talking about are British crochet terms. So this is the British treble, which, if you are used to using US terms, is a double crochet in US terms. So a big flag there. I'm going to go through it step by step so you can just clarify that if you are trying to work almost in translation. It's the British treble that we're going to be doing, which is the US double crochet. So I've got chain 20, and then I'm going to turn and I'm going to miss 2. So do you see here on my hook, I've got one here, one of these V's here and one here. I'm going to miss those 2. So I'm going to yarn over. So just like you did for your chain, yarn over like that, and then come into not that first V, not that second V, this third one here, like that. So put your hook in through there, yarn over and bring that back through to the point where you've got 3 loops on your hook like this. Yarn over and through the first 2, and then yarn over and through the second 2 to the point where you're back to just this 1 live loop on your hook. So that is your first and most important stitch, your treble. So now we're going to go back along this chain, working 1 treble into each of those stitches. So go yarn around your hook. You see how here you can see that I've worked that one because it's attached to those stitches that go up to my hook there. So you're not going to be reworking that one. It's that next clean one that you go into there. Yarn over, you've got 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and through the first 2. Yarn over and through the second 2. Now, what's going to make your life the easiest here is paying attention to the angle at which my hook is at. So do you see how when I've done my yarn over, I push my hook in and my hook's in a downwards position like that. I grab that yarn and bring that back through, keeping that hook in a downwards position. When I rotate it upwards, really is just about getting that yarn over to make it easy to bring through the stitches. But whenever you're bringing it through one of the hoops that's on your hook, having it in a downwards position will make that glide much more easily for you. So through and through. So round into the next one, and you go right the way back along your chain until you get to that slip knot. And when you get back to here, so do you see how that's my slip knot? That's the first chain that I made. You'll do the same thing into that final or first chain like that, and you will have completed your first row of treble stitches. So now it's time, and this is what we're going to be doing for all of them, is we will be turning, because we're working in rows, we're not working in rounds. If you're more used to amigurumi style of crochet, we're going to turn that the other way around, and we will now be working back into the back side effectively, so the wrong side of these stitches as we return with this row. So when it comes to working the second row, so when we go back across these stitches, because we're making effectively rectangles that we need to be as square as possible, what we're going to do is chain 2 stitches before we actually work our first treble. And the 2 chains act in place of one of the trebles. So just to go through that, we've got 18 trebles at the moment. That's what we did, was 18 trebles. But on this return row, we're only going to be working 17 of them, because this first chain 2 that we're about to do will act as the 18th. So just to explain that, so we came along this way, we turned, so I'm looking at the back of those first row of stitches that I've done. So I'm going to go 1 and 2 chains, and then where I'll be working into is not this first one here, it will be that second one. And that's because, do you see how we've got a treble here? Our chain 2 acts as that, so it's piled on top of that one. So where we'll be doing the first one, you go yarn round to do your treble, and you're going to be going into this stitch here to work the first one. So just to show you that once more, really nice and slowly. You've chained your 2, yarn round your hook to work your treble, and go into this one here. So you're going to be doing 17 of those on the way back. So that's 1, 2, and just to make it really clear, when you're going in to work these stitches, you see how you've still got those V's that sit along the top that look a little bit like your chain, but what you need to be doing is going right the way beneath them. So in beneath both sides of that V like that, and work that treble on top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then your last one takes it to 17, which will keep that. You see how I've gone right the way beneath both sides of that V again like that, and that will keep that nice and square, with that first one acting as the first treble. So this is the principle, I guess, of the whole blanket. But to do your tension square, we're going to do 5 rows initially. So I've done 1 at 2, I'm going to turn again, and then do the same thing again. So I'll be doing 1, 2 chains up the side, missing that one there. Do you see how that's effectively my first one, but my chains come out of that one? I'll do my first treble into this one here. So the stitch that sits on top of that second treble in. So back again, doing 17. Now, the most common mistake that people make when they're learning to crochet rows for the first time is that you've started with 18, and we need 18 in order for it to continue to be a rectangle. But what you tend to do is you tend to lose one off either end when you're turning and going backwards and forwards. And so you basically create a triangle. Now, to make sure that you don't do that, because it is going to be really fundamental to this pattern that you have the right number of stitches and that it is a rectangle. After every single row, just double check that you've still got your 18. So when I go to finish that row, I'm going to check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So I'm going to chain my 2 up again, and then make sure that I'm going to get my 17 in on the way back. And the most common way of losing one off the end is not working this final one here. So just make sure that you are always actually going into that one right on the end to make sure that you've done 17 before you turn that round again, chain 2, and then go backwards. So just to recap how to count them one more time before I turn and I do my final row, when you're counting that you have got the right number of stitches to make sure we stay on track, you can either count the actual trebles, so down here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, obviously with that chain 2 at the end counting as a treble, or you can also then count them off the top to make sure that you're not going to miss one where you turn. So if you're counting them off the top, you can count the V's off the top there. The one that's the hardest to count will be that one at the end where you did your chain. So just make sure that you don't forget that one, because that's the one that you're most likely to forget, that will cause you to lose one each time and it will become a triangle. So one more time, I'm going to go nice and slowly to work this last row for you so you can see it. My chain 2, missing the bottom of that one there, but making sure I go into this one first, underneath both sides of the V like that, and do my 17 trebles. So when you've finished your 5 rows, in order to then finish the piece, secure that end, because we're then going to measure it, all you need to do is break your yarn, or obviously cut your yarn if you've got your scissors, and then pull the end through like that. Now don't leave it too short, because you will have to sew this end in somewhere. So don't leave it a couple of centimeters, leave it there, and it'll make your life a lot easier when you're actually sewing that in later on. So congratulations if this is the first ever piece of crochet that you have made. Obviously this will not form part of our blanket at all. This is just a little sampler piece for us to check our tension. Tomorrow we will go through everything that we've gone through again today, but with the correct number of stitches to actually make this first piece of the puzzle. So we'll be making effectively exactly the same thing, but a bit bigger with different stitch counts tomorrow. But I'll recap all of that in the next video. So now we're going to measure our tension. Now I haven't washed or blocked this sample. This is straight off my hook that I'm going to measure it. So long as you do the same, then you'll be able to work to the same guidelines. So what we're looking for is to count 16 of our trebles through the middle. So obviously we worked 18. You'll be able to ignore the edges. And then what you need to do is get 16 and just check that they're in or around 10 centimetres will be about a match. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 is coming in at 10 centimetres. Now, as I predicted, on a 4.5, mine's slightly bigger than exactly that. So it'll be my decision really as to whether I want to carry on my 4.5, being a bit conscious of the fact that it's likely to be a bit looser, or whether I move down to my 4 mil so that then I can relax and not really think about my tension. Now, if yours is anything 9 and sub, I would absolutely recommend going for a bigger hook size so that your life is a little bit easier. And that way your blanket will end up about the same size as mine rather than much, much smaller. If it's anywhere past where mine is really, so if you're getting close to this 10.5 to 11, I would recommend going down a hook size like I'm going to. That means that you're not going to end up with too much fluidity in those stitches where you've not got the same kind of structure through your blanket. So let's just measure the rows for a second. Now, again, this one's quite approximate. This is going to be, so when you're measuring rows, if you look, that is a row there. So you're going to measure 1, 2, 3 and 4, because we did 5. So basically it allows you to ignore 1. So when you're measuring 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, you want it to be about 4.5 centimetres, but anything between 4 and 5, again, will be absolutely fine. Just be aware of where your tension's sitting. So mine's sitting bang smack in the middle. It means that if I am going to go down to my 4, it'll probably come down closer to the 4 mark. As I said at the beginning, we're not wearing our blanket. It's not a hat, it's not a garment, so it doesn't need to be spot on tension-wise. It's more just making sure that you're not going to use too much yarn on each panel, or that you will end up with a blanket that's stiff, so it's not nice when you want to put it over your shoulders or snuggle into it as it's designed to be used. Right, so that's tension covered. Really what you need to do is conclude which hook size you're going to carry on with, and then you're going to need colour 1 again for tomorrow, and we're going to go right the way back to the beginning, but this time we are going to be making our first half of our central square. So our first panel, we're going to chain that tomorrow.